If your code is starting to get large enough that it's overwhelming you, a really nice thing you can do is you can make it shorter and more organized using methods. So here is some student code for this kind of Frogger game. So you've got, hold on. Okay, so we've got some bouncing things, and then when I hit the space bar, the frog goes, and if it hits one, and if one of the things hit it, it resets, and we lose a life. Okay, so here's what their code looks like. They've got a lot of these if statements, these sets of if statements, which test if the box, which is the frog, is getting hit by one of the bouncing circles. But what's inside the if statement is the same every time. We subtract a life, we reset the frog's position to the bottom of the screen, and we tell it that it shouldn't be moving. So if you have repeated code like this that represents a single logical idea in your game, you could make a method. So the single logical idea here is whenever I get hit by an object, I want to reset everything. So I'm going to cut this code, and I'm going to have reset frog be a method. The fact that it has opening and closing parentheses is how Java knows that it's supposed to be a command. It's supposed to be a method instead of a variable. And it's in red right now because we haven't actually created it. So remember what you know about creating methods. You want to find the closing brace to the method you're in right now, which is draw. And now I'm going to create the template for a method. So public something, something, and then parentheses, and then the actual lines of Java that you want to do when the command runs go in between the curly braces. So remember what the something and the something are. This is the name of your command, whatever's right before the parentheses. So for us, we wanted to call it reset frog. What happens before the name of the command is whatever the output or the return value should be. In our case, we're not trying to ask the method a question where it's going to calculate an answer and give it back to us. Instead, this method is just there to do some actions for us. So whenever you don't have any type of return value, you'd use void. And now I'm going to go ahead and paste the code in there. And these are the three things I want it to do when we want to reset the frog. So now that I've created this command, every single time we've got an object that's hitting our frog, we can replace the middle section with the reset frog command. So already this is like a little bit easier to look at now. Let's run it and make sure it still works the way we want it to work. Okay, still seems to work. So another thing we can do is we can replace each of these sets of if statements with a single command as well. And the reason I know that is because each of these sets of if statements is doing a similar thing, and the structure is the same. The overall pattern in the if statements is the same. So here's what the pattern is. So you remember our collision detection, we want to say something like this. We want to ask whether the coordinates for the ball are between the left and the right side of our frog. So like, has the ball horizontally, is the ball horizontally located within the frog? And then we want to ask, if that's true, is the ball vertically in the right spot to be inside the frog? So is the ball between the top and the bottom? So the problem is we need a different set of if statements for every single object because there are different sets of variables. So for the ball x1, y1, we want to know, like, is x1 larger than frog x, and is x1 smaller than frog x plus 50, which is the right side of the frog here. So I'm asking, is the center of the first ball between the left and right hand sides? But of course, we might have another ball which is located at x2, y2, and to ask if this ball is hitting the frog, the structure of the if statements is the same. It's the same pattern because we're asking the same question, only this time, instead of x1, we're using x2 as the variable. So whenever you're doing the same thing, you're asking the same question, but there's just one part of it that's changing, you might be able to generalize the idea. So we could write a single set of if statements that could apply no matter what variables they were. So what we want to do is we want to ask ourselves, what's the part that's changing? So the part that's changing are the coordinates for the ball that we're testing. Everything else is the same. So instead of saying x1 or x2, I'm going to give it a general name. So it's not going to refer to a specific ball, but I'm still going to call it like ball x or something like that. And now if I want this code to work, if I want it to test if ball 1 is hitting the frog, then I'll set ball x equal to x1. And if I want to test it for ball 2, then I'll set ball x to be equal to x2. So it's like this variable can be equal to whatever particular ball variables we want to be testing for. So let's try and actually make this into a command now. So here I am at the bottom of the draw method, and I'm going to make my own command. So public something is hitting frog is going to be the name of my command, because I'm asking a question. Is something hitting the frog? And then right now I'll just have empty opening and closing parentheses, and then I'll have my braces. So let's start to write this. So I'm saying if ball x is larger than frog x and ball x is less than frog x plus 50. And then more if statements here. So that's the kind of thing we want. Okay, so a lot of things are red here. So all of these red things are inputs that our function needs in order to be able to do the if statement. So we need to know what x coordinate are we talking about for ball x, and where is frog x. So the way that we actually assign numbers to these is we make them inputs to the command. So here I'm going to make an integer called ball x and another integer called ball y. And let's make another integer called frog x. And so these aren't red anymore because these are now defined. Whenever I run the command, I'm going to give it 3 numbers as input. I'm going to say is hitting frog. And then I'm going to tell it where's the ball x and where's the ball y and where's the frog x. So here's what it would look like to run. Up here, instead of all this is testing to see if we're hitting, it looks like the 4th ball because we're using x4. So instead of all this, I'm just going to say if is hitting frog equals true. And now I need to give it the inputs. So is hitting frog, we saw, needs 3 inputs, the x, the y, and the frog x. So the x and y I want to be testing for are x4 and y4. And then frog x is always the same. It's just going to be frog x. It looks like in this particular program there is no frog x variable. I think the frog is just always at 350. So I'm going to plug that in. Okay, so now I'm running the command and I'm giving it the numbers that I want as input. But if I wanted to test a different ball that wasn't the 4th ball, I could just change the numbers. So if I change this to 3 and 3, now the x3 variable is automatically going to get assigned to the ball x variable. And when we run the if statement, this question is going to be about the x3 variable instead of the x4 variable. Because this if statement is about whatever number is inside ball x, and the number for ball x gets assigned from where I actually run it from. Okay, so it's still in red, and the reason it's in red is because we need to give back an answer. So that's the return value. So I said this is asking a question. It's a yes or no question. I'm saying, is something hitting the frog? So the answer to my question is a yes or a no answer, and the data type for that is Boolean. So here, my return type is going to be Boolean because the result from this command is going to be a yes or a no. So I ask, is the ball between the frog x and y? So you do this part. So then I'll have another if statement that's about the y. And then if all that works, then this is where I know that something is actually hitting the frog. So this is where we were saying reset frog before. But this command isn't about, this command is just about asking the question, is something hitting the frog? So I don't actually want to do any actions here. I want to actually answer the question. if both of these if statements are true, then I want to say, yes, it is true that something's hitting the frog. So I'm going to give back true as the answer. If the if statements aren't true, then I want to return false because the answer to the question, is something hitting the frog, is no. The answer is false. So I'm going to return a yes or a no answer depending on whether or not these if statements are true. And when I return the yes or no answer back to this if statement, it'll say, oh, yeah, it's hitting the frog. Okay, I'm going to reset the frog. So once you've done that, now everything becomes super, super short because I don't need these pairs of if statements. I just need a single if statement. And the if statement is much easier to read. So here I got x2, y2, 350 equals true. So see how much easier this is to read than the original? The original looks like crazy, like numbers and what do they mean and what's happening. And now I'm saying if something's hitting the frog, reset the frog. If something else is hitting the frog, reset the frog. And then I control what's hitting the frog by controlling what actual numbers I'm giving to the method. Okay, I hope that this was helpful.